to begin.
You're listening to Magrito Podcast Network, celebrating the culture of Chicanos and Latinos one story and voice at a time. Listen to more Magrito Podcast Network shows over at magrito.net.
You're listening to KQBH LP, Los Angeles, California, 101.5 FM, a community service of Boyle Heights Art Conservatory. You're listening to the Social Primate with your host, Eddie Aguirre. And today I'm joined by Ernesto Ayala.
Gracias. Yeah.
What's up, Ernesto? Thank you for being in the studio.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man. You know, I'm digging the space, man.
I know we were just talking off air that you're just making your way back out of, or down from Pacoima, right?
Yeah.
San Fernando Valley, was that?
San Fernando Valley, that's right, yeah. La tierra de Richie Valens.
Hey, Richie Valens. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for making the time to come out onto the show. Like we were talking again off air, I was just mentioning that I first came across your work through Rearte, right here down the street at Boyle Heights, through Viva Padilla. You guys were having some presentations on Chicanismo and Aztlan. How do you pronounce it?
Aztlan, yeah.
Aztlan, and like how the struggles relate to what's currently happening in Palestine, right?
Yeah.
Now, like I mentioned to you, in the last couple of months, maybe a year or two, I've been in this process, like this journey of self-identity and trying to reconnect to my roots. When I started seeing that these kind of events were happening, it stirred my curiosity because I wanted to know more. I wanted to be able to get information directly from the people rather than just going on Google and trying to get whatever, first page results I get. A lot of the times while I was doing that research, you come across just kind of like watered down information or just something that kind of glosses over this info. So again, when I found out that there was events kind of like this happening locally, I was immediately curious. I haven't had the chance to physically be in those presentations, but through you, you connected with me. You started sending me links to presentations that you've been on. And, when I had the time, I checked them out. And after watching those hour-and-a-half presentations or so, I walked out of there or, finished listening to this with this new, more curiosity, more questions. Because I was like, whoa, where has this information been this whole time for me? Yeah. I mentioned as well that I'm turning 34 next week. So only in the last 2 years, right? So the first 30 years of my life, I've been kind of just like, I'm American, I'm not a Mexican-American, I'm American first. But throughout that process, again, I've started kind of breaking down those walls and changing that mindset. Yeah. So again, I've been able to walk a little bit more with some pride, where I come from. People ask oh, are you Mexican? I'd be like, yeah, I'm Mexican-American. My parents are Mexican. I carry a little bit more with again, that pride. Yeah. But here comes a but. When I started seeing these posts on social media, Instagram being shared, there was a bunch of these comments that were kind of opposing what you guys were talking about or saying you're not talking about it the right way. And that's when, again, me as a newcomer, I'm confused. I'm already confused as it is, but now I'm seeing these two sides when we're supposed to be, air quotes, in the same group. Yeah. Now we're kind of screaming at each other. Now I'm, as a newcomer, I'm just do I even want to bother finding out more? Yeah. And hence why I asked you to be on here, because I feel like I can have an insightful conversation about what this means, Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about your background at this point?
Yeah. I grew up in Pacoima, 42, ¿verdad? I grew up in La Raza Unida party, ¿verdad? In generally in the Chicano movement. But specifically in the Raza Unida party because of my dad. Both my parents, but specifically because of my dad. My dad, he was the chair of the Raza Unida for quite a few years, and he became a member of La Raza Unida at the 1970 Chicano moratorium right here in East LA.
Oh, crazy.
And yeah, so he was there when all that happened, but he said that that's the day he made a commitment to his people, to the Raza, and he kept it ever since, So I grew up seeing, him, dedicate tremendous amounts of hours of effort, of dedication to trying to build this organization, that we've carried on up till now, La Raza Unida, together with other compañeras and compañeros, that have come and gone, some that have stayed, ¿verdad? And so I grew up in that world, but I grew up from a very young age knowing that I'm a Chicano. Knowing about my family history también, and I think that helped out a lot because my family is from San Fernando. They're from San Fernando, Pacoima, so you have the San Fernando Valley, and then you have a little chunk of it that is the city of San Fernando. and that's like the oldest part of the entire San Fernando Valley. And then you have within that, you have the Mexican section, which is the oldest part of San Fernando.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where my family is from that little piece right there. Obviously, I'm from Mexico, my mom's from Mexico. My dad's mom was from Mexico, so Chicano, Mexicano. But, I always felt a lot of pride for where I'm from, from there, from Pacoima and San Fernando. So, I grew up with my dad telling me stories about the family, telling me stuff that the family went through, ¿verdad? Yeah. They were, American citizens, but they were kicked out during the Depression. So that was something that always stayed, like a wound, in the hearts. Because I know from the story that I heard of that is that my great-grandfather, he was kicked out with his family, and he had 2 of his kids starved to death on the way to Mexico.
Dude,
yeah. And they lost the house that they had. The house is still there, by the way, and I've actually, I make it like a tradition to taking my daughter, who's 16 now. I haven't taken my baby yet, pero I have taken up pictures. But I took my daughter and took pictures of her there because there's this over 100 years old wall that my great grandfather made, and it's still there, man.
Oh, for real?
Yeah.
Right so I'm sorry to ask, but the house at this point it belongs to someone else.
Yeah. Well, what happened from what I heard is that when they got kicked out, some Anglo lady who was a teacher, she said she was going to take care of it. She kept it. And then I'm sure she sold it to someone else, So yeah, someone else lives there now without another Chicano Mexicano family. I don't know.
Yeah, but the wall persists right there.
Yeah, the wall persists, exactly, man. So that's amazing, man. It's across the street from Palomas Park, if anyone knows San Fernando. But that whole, that little area right there, and that's the area where La Raza Unida started in the San Fernando Valley. Mm-hmm. It was my dad and other mechistas from CSUN, Cal State Northridge, that they saw that, it was good to organize on campus, but the struggle was in the barrio, back in the neighborhood. And so they decided to leave campus and organize the Raza Unida chapter. And so, yeah, again, that's what I grew up in, ¿verdad? I grew up with these concepts from a very young age. Mm-hmm. I grew up being in meetings and demonstrations, conferences, all sorts of stuff, meeting all sorts of people, seeing some amazing speakers, ¿verdad? And just seeing, again, people that dedicated so much of their lives, ¿verdad? Mm-hmm. to building something that could, potentially, and did, and has, ¿verdad? Created at least a little better of a world for our people, ¿verdad?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point that you put, because, again, I was born 1990, so I grew up 90s, 2000s, and, to now. Yeah. But my reality compared to what I read of stuff that happened is completely different. Like, mm-hmm. I experienced like very small acts of racism mm-hmm. growing up where I did, Southeast LA. Mm-hmm. I mean, the area is predominantly like Hispanic, Latino, just brown people, however you want to call them, because I know now it's like you can't even say Latino for some reason. Anyways, brown, right? We're brown people there. So I experienced very little acts of it until I got out to like college and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. That's when I experienced more and like kind of really saw where my place was, right? Or what I thought my place was then. But again, growing up, to me, it was just like, things are like this because they've always been like this. But you start reading, you're like, dang, like there was a lot of struggle just to get to this point where we feel at least a little comfortable, Yeah. And even now, right, we still have our modern day fights and injustices, but you see the progression of time. You will see that there's still some sort of progressive action that happened during mm-hmm. this whole time, right? So it's easier for us to forget, like for me to forget. Yeah. Like again, I feel kind of dumb knowing that the whole Chicano moratorium, like I wasn't even fully aware of what that meant. Mm. And I started reading, like when, everybody started organizing, right? There was this August 29th, I believe, when the day of, and, through the acts that happened with the police showing up and just starting chaos, mm-hmm. they ended up killing the reporter,
mm-hmm. Ruben
Salazar. And again, this is history that I had no idea of. Yeah. And granted, when I was in college, the last class that I intended to take, because I thought like, I'm brown, I don't need to take a class about Chicano studies. I didn't. So my question's always been like, if we don't put ourselves in the positions where we're being taught this, whether it's in an institution or upon ourselves, it's like, are we really ever going to know the real history of what's been going on? Yeah,
that's a good point, brother, because, one of the things that we struggle, ¿verdad? And it's something, like you said, like things that seem normal. Mm-hmm. Why do Chicanos have to if they learn about themselves, they learn it already at such a late age.
Exactly.
Know? Why? I mean, we're not even talking about the history of another country. We're talking about the history of here, and what our people have had to go through here and what we have done, and all these things, historical moments, historical figures, organizations, and all that stuff. So, I mean, you're not dumb for not knowing that. It's just, it's kept from you. It's kept from us. I was fortunate that I had a father that, he was involved in that, and he was like, well, I need to teach my son this, and my daughter, my sister, and include my mom, his compañera, to be, a part of it. Pero, that's one of the struggles that we're always having is, this should be taught from a very young age. Kids have a right to know this history, of themselves.
Yeah.
¿Verdad? And even if it's like other children, they have a right to know about the land that they're on. What have the Chicano? Who are the Chicanos? What are Chicanos? What do they even mean by all this? What are all these concepts of Aslan and all that?
Yeah.
What does that even mean? They have a right to know that, but it's kept from us, and that's on purpose. That's on purpose because I mean, then, these ideas. I mean, the fact that if you have an identity and you're able to relate to someone else, then that already creates a bond, even if you don't know that person.
Yes.
And that's something that's been taken from us.
Yeah, and I've kind of had that argument with myself and other people. I wouldn't say an argument, more of just a discussion, right? Like, 'cause we're trying to build ideas. The idea is not to create a conversation that's going to pit people against each other, right? Like, we want to be able to have an open conversation and really address these. So one of the things was like, okay, to me, from my perspective, yes, there's organizations still happening nowadays, but it feels like from its peaking point in the 60s and 70s, it hasn't really reached that way now. And now we have tools where we can share information and organize a little quicker, but yet there's nothing at that level that we've been able to put together,
Yeah.
And that makes me think like, okay, is this because nobody cares? Is this because we're self-imposing this upon ourselves, or has this systematically changed over the last couple of decades to prevent that stuff happening again?
Oh, definitely. I mean, one of the things that I mentioned to people when I speak, is that when the whole of the Chicano movement hit its peak and the Raza Unida, was birthed and all that, there was only 8 million of us. That's it. Only 8 million
in the United
States. Yeah.
Oh my God.
That is it.
Yeah.
Today, there is over 40 or 50 million Chicanos, Mexicanos, Raza, Latinos, etc. And we have naturally repopulated states where we have always been. There's so many other things that you would think, what's up with this group of people? Why when there was only 8 million of them, did they form such a strong movement? And now that there's like so many of them, their movements, it's not as strong as they could be or they should be. ¿Verdad? I think there's a lot of things that go into that, ¿verdad? I mean, it's like you said when you saw the social media posts and all that. There's a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
And especially now, and that's on purpose too, ¿verdad? Like I think the purpose of a lot of that is to just dissuade people from even getting involved at all. Because they're like, oh my God, I don't even care, man. I got to go to work. I got to feed my kids, or I got to go to school. What am I going to worry about this stuff?
Yeah, you got to stay in the machine. Yeah.
But on purpose, they try to confuse you. So first of all, I mean, we don't learn any of this. We don't learn about the Chicano moratorium. We don't learn that people like us have had such an impact on this country. I mean, first of all, they took this land from us. And when I say us, I include, the tribes, because that's a lot of Chicanos originally descend from a lot of tribes, from the Southwest, what we call Aslan. They took the land from us. They've exploited the land. They've used our labor to exploit the land. But we don't learn about any of this at all. So by the time we're in college, we already have a preconceived idea of who we aren't or who we are, ¿verdad? And a lot of people make, wrong assumptions based on that, and even more confused assumptions that just confuse people even more than they're already confused, ¿verdad? And I think a lot of that is I think that's on purpose again, ¿verdad? I think that on purpose they don't want Chicanos to know about themselves. They don't want us to know the potential that we have, and the right that we have on land that is ours. You know?
Yeah, I think it was last week's episode with Is Gutierrez. We were talking. He's a director for a film for some events that happened in Texas back in like the 1920s, and we were having this conversation that if you take a step back and look at history, we have all these events, all these patterns that are recurring, specifically with people from Mexican descent, or just again Spanish speaking or whatever. Again, I don't even know the labels to these, so you get what I'm saying, But
La Raza.
La Raza. So you have this history where you see them in the 1920s, or what was it, 1920s. 1930s was the Depression, right? Everybody, there was a huge immigration, or not immigration. They rounded people up.
Repatriation, they called it.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. And then flash forward a couple years, you have the Bracero program now taking people back in. Yeah. And then you flash forward again, and there's these cycles of people being pushed out, come back in, pushed out, come back in. But it's only in the name of so-called progress, right? It's only when they need the extra labor that they are open to, like, hey, we need you, come in. And now when we don't need you, it's like, put up the wall, take them out. It's like, okay, what the heck? So it kind of makes you think again, like, if you're really paying attention, you start seeing that there's these patterns, and it's something that we're currently, again, it's also an election year that we're, is it an election year?
Yeah.
No. Yeah, right? Yeah, there's another year. We're seeing these things happen where, okay, these conversations and narratives are just repeating themselves again. Yeah. And some people are not paying attention, that they think this is a new thing. Like, they're going to take my jobs. It's like, this has been going on since the Great Depression. And before it's like, you got to pay attention, and I think when you start finding this information, I think you're less likely to kind of like fight against people who are in the same struggle with you, because there's again, you're able to bond. But going back to these social media posts that I've seen and just conversations in general, it's like I'm trying to understand first and foremost what this what Aslan means, right? Like from my understanding, again, and very limited understanding of it, is that like it's like this place where that originated with I guess Aztecs, right? Or
sure, man. There's the original ancient myth, ¿verdad? And that's not necessarily the one we refer to, but I think that kind of gives an idea of what we're talking about. So it's the story of how it was a group of people that migrated, and this is true. Like, they don't know exactly where this migration was from, but they migrated from a place called Aztlán, ¿verdad? Which was north of Mexico City, ¿verdad? And they migrated down into what is Lake Texcoco, and that's where they founded Tenochtitlan. But they walked for like 200 years or something. Yeah. So that was like a large expanse of area that they walked, ¿verdad? And they were supposedly looking for a symbol where to build their new city, because they had abandoned their old city, ¿verdad? And or town, or whichever. And and the symbol they were looking for is the symbol that's on the flag, the eagle on a nopal, ¿verdad? And some people debate whether it was actual snake, ¿verdad, or not, or if it was some other symbol. Pero yeah, the eagle on the nopal with a snake. So that's why that's on the Mexican flag, And so they found that right there in that lake, and so that's where they decided to settle and start their Tenochtitlan, which became a
huge empire.
And the Mexicas. So that's the old story. I think that there's a lot of beauty in that story, ¿verdad? I think that's like something fundamental that kids should learn, because it teaches you that you are indigenous. That even if you are in Mexico, this is still your land. You had ancestors here a long time ago. And there's a lot of archaeological and linguistic ties with that. Part of my presentation that I did on Aztlán, I go into that a little bit, but I talk about, I show how, for example, you have the Uto Nahuatl languages, which are all these languages they have a common origin, right? So those languages, of course, Nahuatl, is one of them, which is what's spoken by the Mexica in Mexico, but it's also spoken, and it used to be spoken in Central America, and it's called Uto because of the Ute, which is the Ute people, the Ute nation, ¿verdad? Paiute and all of them, Shoshone, which they're like all the way in Idaho and all that. So you have this whole area from the Southwest, quote unquote Southwest, through Mexico, through Central America, that had common languages being spoken. And there's been a lot of study of where those languages originated, one of the studies states that they were the mother language of all those languages, of Nahuatl and all these languages spoken throughout, this part of the Southwest and Mesoamerica, originated in the southern San Joaquin Valley. So that's like Bakersfield or something like
Bakersfield, out of all places.
Out of all places, that's the mecca of Chicanos now. Yeah. And so there's all that stuff. There's there's the Chaco Canyon, for example, in New Mexico, where they found like these vessels, these like large cups that they made, and there's been cacao in them. And this is in New Mexico, in the middle of the desert. There's no cacao, does not grow there, right? And they've also found that the people that were there, hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, they had guacamaya aviaries. So they raised guacamayas, the parrots. So now they know, ¿verdad?, that there was a trade from all the way into Mexico and Central America. There was a trade of parrots to over here, ¿verdad? And chocolate and all that. And then there was also like, beads and jade and stuff like that going south. So I think that's part of the history that we should know, ¿verdad? Kind of gives a little bit more of face to that ancient myth. Yeah. But even then, why does that myth survive so much, ¿verdad? Because, I mean, that's not the only myth that existed. The Mexicas had a lot of myths. All indigenous groups had so many myths or creation stories, stuff like that. Yeah. But that one has stuck with the Raza for thousands of years. But why? Because it later on in the 1960s, when all these things were going on about in the world, ¿verdad? And all these social movements started happening in the United States because, among Africans and among our native sisters and brothers and Chicanos and Boricuas también, ¿verdad? And of course the anti-war movement and all that. Yeah. So people had to question who we were in society, like who as Chicanos, who am I, ¿verdad? Why am I being sent off to some other country to kill or be killed? And then I come back here and I don't even get treated with any, the same respect as anyone else. Won't even get buried in the same cemeteries as other veterans, and that happened, So it made people question a lot. And for a lot of Chicanos, they were like, well, I'm on my land. They took this from us, So, but what do we call this? There was no real name for it, ¿verdad? So when this idea of Aztlán, it started coming out, and it came out. A lot of people talk about Alurista. He wrote the Plan de Aztlán, and that was in 1968 that he wrote it, and they read it at a Chicano Youth Liberation Conference in Colorado. But it already existed before that, ¿verdad? It was the first written account of someone talking about Aztlán as a homeland for Chicanos was actually written by Jack Forbes, who was native. And he wrote a book called Aztecas del Norte because he grew up in El Monte. Yeah.
El Monte here?
El Monte here, yeah.
Oh, dang.
And he would say, like he grew up among Chicanos, and Chicanos were like, they were native people, ¿verdad? So they're supposed to put this book out again. It's out of print. It's like an old book, but I think it's a fundamental book for anyone that wants to know about Chicanos, Aztecas del Norte. And in there he says, that Chicanos are, I think he says the largest Anishinaabe, which means native indigenous people in North America, and many of them consider Aztlán their homeland. So he says that way before any Chicano said it, at least on paper. Yeah. But so this idea of us having a homeland, that Aztlán just gave it a name. That's it. And because there is a physical territory that has given birth to who we are as Chicanos, because we're not exactly Mexicanos as someone in Mexico, They would go through a whole different socialization, a whole, different worldview growing up here, ¿verdad? And so, I mean, that's basically what it is. The foundations for Aztlán as a nation, and I think that's where people get a lot of scared, like, oh my God, nation, ¿verdad? They're there. I mean, the Raza, and I say Raza, la Raza, we have repopulated basically all of the states that were taken from us,
Yeah. Mostly a majority in most of them, yeah.
California, Texas, obviously, ¿verdad? Arizona, New Mexico, all these states, Colorado's near has, I think, 30%. And it's been our labor, because we're working class people, ¿verdad? Whether we just arrived here or we've been here for generations, but we're working class people. Our labor has built all the cities, ¿verdad? And there was actually a report that came out. It's called the Latino GDP. If you Google that, te sale allí, man. This report came out last year, and then it came out before the pandemic. But the one that they put out last year, it straight up said right there that if Latinos in the United States were their own nation, this is not a Chicano movement, anything. If Latinos in the United States were their own nation, they would be the 5th largest GDP on Earth.
Yeah. I just pulled that up right now. It says the GDP of Latinos in the U.S. was $3.23 trillion in 2021. And it says if Latinos living in the United States were an independent nation, the U.S. Latino GDP will represent the 5th largest GDP in the world.
So
oh my God!
There's an economic foundation for this, but and I mean the question that we pose as in La Raza Unida to our people, ¿verdad? Is we're told that we should be like thankful of the United States and this and that and but it's the other way around. The United States, if it wasn't for the land that they took from us and the labor that they take from us daily, it would collapse. I mean, the two, just that on its own, and then the two largest states that contribute to the GDP of the United States are California and Texas. Where would it be without that? It would not be.
Yeah, right.
So
that is intense. Again, because when you look at that information, you can't help but be like, again, just your mind exploded because it's facts, and that's the crazy part because there's this economical power that. Is there, right? That it's obviously, statistics, stuff that we can measure, but yet there's not that same power in terms of political power.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, so that's where you're like, what's going on here? What if you were to give power to some of these groups? Then what can be done? If we've been able to make the 5th largest GDP, if we had the opportunity, what can we do?
Exactly. And if people would just think about that, then it would help us. That would light a fire inside so many of us, and they would question, like, if that's who we are economically, and on land that was taken from us, then why are our neighborhoods this way?
Yeah.
Why are our people at the bottom? Why do some of the poorest people in the United States are the people that produce the most wealth. It's the campesinos. The San Joaquin Valley. That's one of the poorest areas of the United States. If you go there, I worked in organized labor, and I worked a little bit with the UFW, United Farm Workers, and we would go out there, man, and we would visit the campesinos at their houses or at their work, and these are like third world conditions, man. And here in California. But the San Joaquin Valley is like the 15th largest economy on its own. Who's doing all that work? That's Raza.
Yeah.
And the Filipinos too, and I'll consider them Raza too, man. The brown hands that are creating trillions of dollars in wealth, but they can't barely pay their anything, and a lot of them, live in, very terrible conditions. So imagine, or even here in the barrios, Pacoima, San Fernando, where I'm from, here in Boyle Heights, East LA, wherever there's Raza, South LA, ¿verdad? Todo eso. Or, we've been to other parts, Albuquerque, Denver, all those, barrios. Why do our communities go through, why are we economically disadvantaged? Why are we the last? Why don't we learn about ourselves? And then you learn this, and you're like, wow, man, we are a powerhouse, but we don't know it.
Exactly.
They know it.
Yeah.
And there's people that have written about this, and I mean people in power, in this presentation that I give, about Aslan to Palestine, I mentioned it también. For example, there's Samuel Huntington, and if you look up the Hispanic Challenge, Samuel Huntington was one of the founders of the Trilateral Commission. He worked under the Johnson administration. He was like this big time, think tank political guy, political theorist and advisor to the government. He wrote that paper, the Hispanic Challenge. In that paper, he says that Mexicans are the only group of people, immigrants, he said, that feel that they're at home. And he says, and they rightfully feel that they're at home because they come to, a part of the United States that was taken from them by force, by a war. Mm-hmm. So a lot of Mexicans and Mexican-Americans, that's what it says in that document, feel that they are at home, and that's tearing apart the United States. So something needs to be done about that. Mm-hmm. They're saying that. There's another quote that I take, which was in 1979, I believe. They interviewed William Colby, who was the head of the CIA. This is the head of the CIA said this. Watch. It was at a Playboy magazine article. But they interviewed the guy from the CIA, and towards the end, they ask him, what's the biggest threat to the United States? You know what this guy says? Uh-huh. Mexicans. He says there's so many million Mexicans in the United States. There's so many millions of Mexicans in Mexico. By the end of the century, which would be the 2000s or late 90s, there's going to be so many million more in the United States. We can't stop them, even if we gave the Border Patrol as many bullets. We just couldn't stop them. No. That's the head of the CIA said that back then. There's another article. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, I'll mention just one more of that because I think it puts into perspective, like the current situation that's on everyone's minds about Palestine. Mm-hmm. Netanyahu, ¿verdad? That horrible person.
Yeah. POS.
¿verdad? It's not even I don't even want to call him a person, ¿verdad? A horrible thing, POS, ¿verdad? He wrote a book. It's called Israel Among the World of Nations, something like that. Oh my God.
I think I had seen you post about it on Instagram, right?
Yeah. In this book, he doesn't say Chicanos and he doesn't say Aslan, but he says how if Palestinians are able to gain nationhood, and again, that's what Palestinians have been vying for. They want their own nation. They deserve their own nation as a people. They deserve to control their destinies as a people, self-determination. That's what we want as well. ¿Verdad? If Palestinians are able to achieve that, that would be terrible because then that would inspire Hispanics in the United States to do the same because we are also living on territory that was taken from us by force. Yeah. And by the end of that century, which was in the 90s he's talking about, we would be a majority in these areas. And, who do we think we would be demanding a nation for ourselves? Mm-hmm. So
based on that, I think it's called the Palestinian Principle.
The Palestinian Principle, exactly, yeah. He's saying it, so it's like, it's not just stuff that Chicanos or people in the movement make up. This is stuff that they know.
Yeah, exactly. They have the information. They have the statistics again. They have these numbers that show otherwise. And that's when it kind of brings it back, quickly, like to the neighborhoods that you see. Again, me growing up in early 90s, 2000s, all I saw in my neighborhoods was gang violence. Mm-hmm. Like it was this thing that was just a cycle that you saw kids go in and out of. And what does that do? When you really take a look at it, what does that do? That cripples your ability to identify, to grow, right? To find substance in your environment. So you're just basically going based off like these things that they're putting in your face to think like, hey, this is the flashy stuff. You want some beer? Like one thing that I remember saying is like this environmental racism, like liquor stores in every corner, billboards about sex and like alcohol and all this stuff. Okay. And they're only usually in communities of, air quotes, lower income or communities of color. Mm-hmm. And you start having like these thoughts. You're like, wait, like, is this meant to be placed here purposely? And again, when you think about it and see this information, it starts making sense that it potentially could be something that's systematically being implemented.
Oh, it is. It definitely is. But I mean, that's what they use our community as, man. That we're like a trough. Cuando comen los puercos. Yeah. That's what we are to them, ¿verdad? Like cuando tienen hambre, when they're hungry, they come and they eat from us, ¿verdad? I mean, the Raza, our people, and we're talking about our people right now. Doesn't mean we're putting down anyone else. I mean, that's also something.
Yeah, that's something that for sure, unfortunately, has to be clarified because. The moment you start saying that, people are like, "Oh, he's talking about us versus them," type of thing.
Yeah, and not at all. Yeah, we're trying to talk about our issues internally, ¿verdad? And so, our people, we're a working class people, ¿verdad? Pero we don't control anything in our communities. You have these corporations that we work for, factories that we work for, all these businesses that we work for, and at the end of the day, whoever owns those businesses, they go home with a big old bag of loot, and the people that live in that neighborhood, they don't have anything. But they created all that wealth. Mm-hmm. When there's a war, what do? ¿verdad? They start recruit so many Chicanos, ¿verdad? And Africans también, and Boricua, and other poor working class colonized people también, pero they recruit so many Chicanos to go fight in their wars.
Yeah.
And what good does that do for us? What good did it do that so many Chicanos went to Iraq or Afghanistan or Vietnam before that, and my dad was in the service at that time, and or World War II. Before that, my grandpa was in the service at that time. What good did they do? I mean, they did what they had to do. They come back home and they couldn't even speak Spanish, or there was parts of the town that were segregated against Mexicans, and how did that make any sense? And so
that's so crazy.
Yeah. So I mean, they view our people as a trough. We're just there for the United States to help them survive, because they need our labor. They obviously need the land, for that, they need us to be ignorant of who we are, confused, and at each other's necks, ¿verdad?
Exactly.
And at other compañeras and compañeros necks, like Africans and other Asian working class people and Boricuas, and they have them, and we're all just fighting each other, ¿verdad? But internally, they need us to be, separated in so many ways, ¿verdad?
To maintain some sort of control.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you see, going back to the whole conversation about the, my personal journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
I asked my mom, I was like, hey, Mom, like, ¿de dónde vienen mis abuelitos? Like, everybody. And she could only get as far as her grandma.
Mm.
And then she was like, de ahí no sé, no estoy seguro, And I've been trying to look for information, again, try to retrace, right, as far as I can. And it comes to a point where you just hit a wall, and you're like, there's a dead trail. There's no more information. And that's when I go back to like these conversations, these opposing conversations about like just the concept of Aslan and, just Chicano, or just identity.
Yeah.
That at some point, if you're privileged enough, you have traces or roots to trace as far as you want.
Mm.
But if you're not, you're kind of just like, like I have no identity. I don't know up to where this goes. So when you're on this process of trying to figure this out, and then you don't know where anything else goes after that, it's like it's easy to be made feel like it's not worth it, like what's the point if I can't find real solutions to this, or answers to my identity air quote crisis. So it's like, again, the confusion just adds to that, and it just makes you, I don't know, retract and kind of like, I don't know, there's no progress internally, right, as a self.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that just makes it really hard sometimes to pursue when you really don't even know where to start or where you even come from.
Yeah. Well, I think, that's why, I mean, identity is a big thing. I mean, it's a basic thing for any group of people. I mean, anywhere on earth, other countries, people have an identity. Right? You go to Mexico, everybody knows they're Mexicano. There's no doubt about it. Whether they're like total indígena or they're like, very güeros or whatever in between, or however, right? You go to, anywhere, Guatemala, Peru or China, Mozambique, everybody knows more or less, oh, this is who I am.
Yeah.
But to us, that's made, it becomes such a big thing because we don't know who we are. We're constantly growing up. We're told, this is America. This is how things are in America. And then as you grow and you kind of, you get a little conscious, like, well, it's not exactly like that, And they talk about American, but that's not how I live at home.
Exactly. It's the complete opposite. That's straight up Mexican.
Yeah, And so you're like, well, what am I? I am born here, or I'm raised here? Because you have Chicanos that are not born here, but they're raised here, they grow up here. Like, what am I? Who am I? Who am I in this whole world, in this system? So I think the reason why Chicano became such a impactful thing is that it gave a name to all these people, because they back then they had nothing, I mean, you couldn't go on 21 or ¿cómo se llama eso?
21 and the ancestry.
Yeah, that didn't exist, and there was no social media. I mean, it was just like family stories or whatever. Yeah. And but people were like, well, we're all here now, and this is the way we live, and and we're Chicanos, and And so that like united a whole people, ¿verdad? That were very different types of people. I mean, because within the Chicano community, you had people that probably had been here for generations, or maybe they just came from Mexico, or maybe they descended from a tribe también, you know. And I think that was mainly like in California, that's been a thing a lot, ¿verdad? And throughout the Southwest, ¿verdad? Pero people that descend from tribes, and they were Chicanos. They're Chicanos, ¿verdad? So it united like this very diverse group of people into like, this is who we are now. And that allowed them to move forward, you know, because then you had that thing with identity that was covered. That was not a question at all, you know. And that's how people move, man. It's like if you go into, let's say, Mexico, if you go into any country and you tell them you're no longer going to be a Mexicano, or you're no longer going to be a Ecuatoriano, you're going to be this that I'm going to tell you are, I mean, like, you're crazy, man. Get out of here. You know. But to us, that's always the thing, because you know, we're not allowed to develop our identity, and it's kept from us over and over and over. And the only thing that's come out of us has been Chicano. That's like the only word that has come from our community. So it stayed, you know, and it gave face to all that, and it gave pride. And this is who we are now, man. With all you know, the scars of colonization and all these things that have happened. You know, we have produced a beautiful people, ¿verdad? That, you know, have like this tapestry of colors, but are native in origin, ¿verdad? That have, you know, a tie to Mexico, you know, but we're our own thing, ¿verdad? And we produce like all these work. I mean, that in that period when the Chicano movement was the strongest, and more people identified with as being Chicano or accepted it, that's when you had like so much culture come out, you know, music, theater, plays. You had like all these organizations and struggling and saying, you know, like, this is what we demand. You don't like it? Well, too bad. We're going to take over this building or something, you know, because this is ours anyways, you know. And that's when we progressed, when we had that identity a little more stronger. They were able to fracture that.
That's something interesting, because you know, I've been reading on things about, like, I think the group is called Mecha.
Oh, Mecha.
How they kind of had to change their name and all this stuff, right? Now, I'm trying to understand this completely from an unbiased position, right? And again, I don't know anything about this. That's why I'm curious. But again, if you're able to analyze things and step back out of it, you can start seeing like these things happen, and you start noticing that there's these little things that have been going through the last years, not just in these type of organizations, but just in the general, where you have these singular things happening that's trying to cause like a tension between things and cause a fracture. And right, when you cause a fracture and you divide already this let's just say group, right, and you manage to divide them, all you're doing is just halting progress.
Exactly.
So when you do that you're stopping everything. And then now you have to fight internally to figure out what's going on, what's the air quote right way, and start nitpicking at things that, you know, they do have weight on them, but it's not the main focus of what you're trying to do as a whole. So it's like, you know, you're trying to focus, like the ship's sinking and you're focusing on like the bed sheets are missing. It's like, guys, come on, there's a bigger issue at whole. We're focusing on the big thing here. That's important too. We'll get to that, but you know, we got to focus on the bigger thing. Now, I do understand that some of these concepts, we got a couple more minutes here, but some of the what's the word I'm looking for? The backlash on this is that, you know, air quotes, the concept of Aztlán has like these like colonial, I don't know, things to it, right? Like, or even the word Chicano has some sort of like, I think they called it indigenous appropriation or something. And I'm trying to understand that, you know? And
I don't think they understand that when they say that.
So I'm like,
just say stuff.
What does that mean? And like, how, if that's the wrong way, then what is the right way to do it, right? And is there a right way? That's the actual question. Like we're having this conversation. This should be something that, again, allows conversation, but it shouldn't be to the point where we're just screaming and trying to stop things from happening.
I mean, I think, again, you know, like I said before, I mean, the fact that our history is kept from us, and then you have people that know absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. And maybe they heard something online and they go with that. And maybe even sometimes in some Chicano studies departments, a lot of the history that we cover, like in these presentations that I've been doing, That's not taught either. So you have a lot of way more confusion, and then I think you have people purposefully want to cause confusion, and they sow that, and they throw out all these things. They just say words, and these words sound catchy, and a lot of people roll with it, and it stifles any progress. I mean, saying like, who are Chicanos colonizing?
Yeah.
I mean, how are because that's who are we calling? Who are we taking land from? Have Chicanos come here like the United States came here in an army and attacked everyone and like kicked them off their land? That's crazy talk.
Yeah.
Have Chicanos come here the way Israel is in Palestine and is pushing everyone out of Gaza or the West Bank? No, man. As a matter of fact, the reason we made that presentation from Aslan to Palestine is because the Palestinians have recognized Chicanos, and as a people like them living under colonial occupation. And I talk about this trip that La Raza Unida, the organization that I belong to, did in 1980, and they met with Yasser Arafat, who at that time was the chair of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, which was the first organization to come out of that whole struggle. And the United, it's like all these different groups came together under this umbrella, PLO, and they've been fighting ever since, ¿verdad? Against occupation, ¿verdad? And they invited La Raza Unida because they learned about Chicanos, and they were like, well, the Chicanos are like us, And it's not the only group, and there's been people from like Northern Ireland, también, they have a similar situation.
Yeah.
South Africa at that point, ¿verdad? When they were under like apartheid rule. White minority apartheid rule, and so Chicanos went there, ¿verdad? And from La Raza Unida, and they met with them, and so to say like ridiculous, wild things like Aslan is colonial and Chicanos are appropriating, when these ideas came to fruition in the Chicano movement, Chicanos included people from tribes, included people that were undocumented, included people that had, it was the poorest of the poor. They had nothing. We had no identity. We had nothing to look back on or lean back on. They had nothing. But out of that came these ideas. So we gave a face to ourselves. That's the power of those words, man. And because of that, it united so many people. And again, it was only 8 million of us. It united so many people to, create a movement that shook the United States and that has kept it scared up till today. I mean, because again, why are Chicano studies constantly under attack all the time? Why are, and why are these groups making such wild claims that they can't even explain to change, the names of historical organizations that, that opened the doors for them to even be there.
Yeah.
And this is, for example, there was the Los Seis de Boulder. These were Chicano students that were part of a strike in Boulder, Colorado. UC Boulder back in the 70s. And it was 6 students. They were blown up. They were blown up. In 2 different car bombings.
What?
These were students. They were Mecha members. They were members of La Raza Unida, some of them actually. But they were going on strike because they wanted Chicano studies on their campus. And they wanted more Chicanos to be able to get a higher education.
Yeah.
So you had people that died literally so that we could be there. Chicanos, Mechistas, Raza Unida members, they don't know. They don't teach you this at all. Not even in Chicano studies.
Oh, it's crazy because I was kind of reading that. I was trying to find like what the public opinion or narrative was going on during that time, or the media narrative, and a lot of it was that they were promoting like that, wanting to have Chicano studies in like these institutions kind of promoted separatist ideologies. Just basically saying like, hey, we're separate from the U.S. We want to make our own thing, and people at face value, they listen to that and they're like, it sounds like, oh, they just want to take over. Like they just want to proclaim something for themselves. But, I wasn't there to really know what the idea is, but like the concept of it, right? If you think about the essence of that idea, it really is just about, again, identity, right? And if it didn't mean that, then, you can always reinterpret things for modern times. That's one of the things that sometimes we look at rules, right? You just something as basic as a U.S. Constitution or something like that. Like, oh, we can't touch it anymore. Like that's that. But you got to remember these things are written for those specific moments in time.
Yeah.
It not always going to reflect the modern society that we're in. So if you need to readapt or reinterpret certain things, like that's totally possible, but not at the cost of fracturing things.
Yeah.
Because at that point you're not doing anything. We should be reinforcing some of these concepts rather than breaking them down just because they don't make sense to us. I know one of the reasons they wanted to change that was because they felt like the name wasn't like completely inclusive to everybody, right? Because it's about the whole patriarchy and all this stuff. Totally understandable again. But at the end of the day, is like you're changing just the name of something. You're not really making progress for the future.
Yeah.
Think about it, really. All you're making is just so on paper it says something else rather than what you initially meant it to be. But what are you really doing?
Sorry.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Well, and it steers, because the whole basic, the basic thing, like with any other oppressed group of people is that back then, as now, but back then obviously it was more out in the open, but that is what we want is self-determination. It's like what the Palestinians want is self-determination. That all that means is like an individual has the right to freely determine their life.
Yeah. As
a group of people, we have the right to freely determine what we want for our own people. We have that right. That's even in the UN, that, peoples have the right to self-determination. That's all. When we talk about Chicano, Aslan, that's basically what it's saying. We have the right as a people to determine our own destiny, and we will fight for that right, whatever that means. When they attack, the ideas of Aslan and Chicano and all that, La Raza, all they end up doing is shunning our future leaders, our future leadership from even engaging in these concepts of self-determination, and even engaging in, what have people like me done regarding this idea, to improve our people's lives. They shun them away from that, and they get involved in other stuff, and which is not going to be any of that, ¿verdad? It's going to just fracture, confuse even more, and people are no longer struggling to build something that could answer a lot of the questions and needs of our people.
Yeah. I mean, one thing for sure, just for people listening to this is like, because there's partly people listening and they're like raging right now, or people who are just agreeing, But at the end, the idea is like, we need to have an open conversation about all these things, right? Like bring everybody to the table, have a real conversation about it, but really try to focus on the stronger points of as a whole, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, what we really want is to bring change that's going to impact us now, that's going to take into account the stuff that happened before, and then be able to progress to the future. But if we continue to make pit stops at these little tiny things that, for me, they're going to probably say something about me, but I'm speaking from the position of a male Mexican-American guy. So I already have my own biases, of course, and I already have my own privileges. But speaking outside of that, it's important to just realize that we're all human. We're all first and foremost human. We're all going to have like various different experiences based on our, growing up. So it's always going to vary, but that struggle between the people in our, let's say Raza, is like, it's going to be common, for most places across the country and, around the world with other groups. So yeah, it's just, we got to keep that conversation going, and I think, being able to sit down with somebody and really kind of just ask the questions and be curious. I think that's a big step already.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're right, man. We should be having these conversations, and I welcome anyone that wants to have these conversations. Hit me up, social media, whatever.
Yeah, for real. And if there's somebody out here who's completely opposed to this, this show is about just speaking to people. So if you have a conversation that you want to go through, you have points that maybe Ernesto and I aren't making, don't make sense to you, let me know, and I'll sit down with you and I'll ask you the questions. But that's the whole point. We're gonna create some cool discussions, and hopefully this brings us together in other forms.
Yeah.
With that being said, we're about to hit the that time. So, Ernesto, what is the best way to reach you on Instagram, or what are your best ways to get in contact with you?
My Instagram, Ernesto Chicano Ayala, and then also La _Raza _Unida _party, And, you know, there's a lot of the stuff that we're doing there, ¿verdad? We posted right there. And, yeah, just hit me up, ¿verdad? I'm open to conversation, ¿verdad? I'm open to learning as well as sharing what I know, ¿verdad? Rearte, I'm going to be doing some more presentations, so, you know, follow Rearte también, ¿verdad? But, yeah, I mean, that's...
No, thank you again for making the time, and this is for sure not going to be the last time we come across each other. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and start signing off. Thank you again for listening to the Social Primate. Make sure to catch up any of the podcast episodes available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. This specific conversation, if you missed it tonight, which you probably won't know you missed it till you listen to it on the podcast, but this will be available in the next couple of weeks. So you heard it here first, and we'll see you guys next time.